Welcome to Forbidden Desires channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. I know how it sounds. I let all three of Dad's friends in. Even saying it out loud now feels like a confession I didn't plan to make. But here we are. It didn't start with a plan. There was no intention, no fantasy. It wasn't about desire, not at first. It was about silence, that thick, heavy kind of silence that wraps around your C****** T and doesn't let you breathe. You ever feel that kind of silence where the house is full of furniture but empty of warmth, where the clock ticks louder than your own thoughts because no one is there to listen to them anyway? That was my world. After Mom passed, Dad became a ghost with a heartbeat. He worked, he ate, he slept, but the part of him that felt anything stayed buried with her. I was just there, not a daughter, not a woman, not even a presence that mattered, just something in the background like the humming of the fridge. Always on, always unnoticed. And then there were them. Dad's friends, Alexander, Lucas, Theo. They weren't strangers. They'd been around since I was a teenager. I used to call them uncles when I was little before I understood what that word meant. They laughed loud, smelled like cigars and cologne. They drank whiskey like it was water. They were just fixtures in Dad's world. Nothing more until the night Dad didn't come home and the three of them showed up anyway, said he told them to come by. I said I shouldn't be alone and maybe I shouldn't have opened the door, but I did. Maybe I shouldn't have smiled, but it felt so good to be seen. They looked at me like they hadn't really noticed me before, like they just realized I wasn't that shy little girl in braces anymore. And in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in months alive. Strange, isn't it? How loneliness can make even a wrong moment feel right, if only for a second. I remember thinking, what harm could it do? Just dinner? Just a laugh. Just one evening of not eating alone. Just a few minutes of pretending this house wasn't soaked in sadness and shadow. But the thing about moments is that they don't always stay small. Some grow into choices, some grow into mistakes, and some they bloom into consequences that don't die. If I had just locked the door, if I had just told them to come back later, maybe I wouldn't still wake up wondering who the hell I became that night. 'Cause what happened next tore apart everything I thought I knew about myself. It wasn't just what we did. It was what we uncovered about need, about hunger, about the parts of us we hide from everyone, even ourselves, and now I carry it every day in silence, in shame, in confusion. So if you've ever let someone, and you shouldn't have, if you've ever reached out, not because you wanted someone, but because you couldn't bear to be alone one more night, then maybe this story is for you. Before we begin, if you've ever been drawn to someone you shouldn't have been, subscribe to Forbidden Desires. These stories, they're not just about scandal. They're about the ache behind every smile, the mistakes we don't always admit out loud, and the moments we still can't explain, even to ourselves. Let me tell you everything because I need to, and maybe, just maybe, you need to hear it. I was 28 when everything changed. Still living in the house I grew up in, the walls stained with memories, the air still carrying traces of Mom's perfume long after she was gone. After her funeral, people stopped visiting, friends disappeared. Neighbors offered their condolences once, then never asked again, and Dad folded into himself. He became routine, not presence. Wake up, shower, coffee, work, sleep, repeat. He didn't talk about her, didn't cry, didn't ask if I was okay. It was like he was holding his breath in a world that no longer made sense. And I was just there, floating beside him in silence. We shared meals, but not conversations. We shared space, but not connection. I could scream, and I'm not sure he would have looked up from his phone. And then there were his friends. Alexander, Lucas, Theo. They'd been part of his life forever, since college. I think they came by every other Saturday night like clockwork, poker drinks, smokes on the back porch. They brought life into the house, even if it wasn't mine. I watched from the hallway, sometimes not because I cared about their game, but because their voices filled the rooms Mom left empty. Alexander was the quiet one. He rarely smiled, but he always watched. He had this way of making you feel like he knew more than he let on, like he saw things, even when you weren't looking his way. Lucas was charming, too charming. He always had a compliment. Reddy always looked you straight in the eye like he was seeing something you didn't know was visible. I used to roll my eyes at his flattery, but over time I started listening. Then there was Theo, the loud one. The one who made everyone laugh even when they didn't want to. He flirted with anything that moved, but you never took him seriously. It was his way, harmless. Or so I thought. They were just Dad's friends, but over time they became more, not romantically, not even intentionally, just constant. When the world felt like it was slipping out from under me, they were the only men who ever said my name out loud. The only ones who asked how I was, who noticed if I changed my hair or if I looked tired, or if I hadn't been around. They weren't just Dad's friends anymore. They became the only male presence I had. And when Dad started traveling more, when his job began pulling him out of town week after week, that presence became something I started to look forward to. I didn't plan it, I didn't even realize it. But every time the doorbell rang, every time I heard Theo's laugh or Lucas's smooth voice floating from the kitchen, or Alexander's eyes quietly trailing mine across the room, a part of me woke up, a part that had been sleeping for too long, waiting for someone, anyone to remind me. I was still here, still visible, still wanted, even if it was just in passing glances, even if it was never said aloud. I started craving their company, the warmth, the attention, the validation, the illusion that I mattered, if only for a little while. And maybe that's where it all began, not with a touch, not with a kiss, but with the ache of being seen after so long of being invisible. It was a Thursday night, the kind of night where the wind whispers through the trees like it's trying to say something you're not ready to hear. Dad had left that morning, another trip, another city, another few days of silence. Going through the house, he texted once when he landed. No call, just a thumbs-up emoji. And back Sunday, that was it. I made myself a light dinner, something quick. I didn't even sit at the table. I ate standing at the kitchen counter, scrolling through my phone, pretending not to feel how quiet the house had become. Then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw them, all three of them. Alexander, Lucas, and Theo, smiling, laughing like it was any other game night. I opened the door, confused. They greeted me with the usual cheer. Theo said he told us to come by, said he'd be gone, but we could still hang. I hesitated. My instinct told me this wasn't right, but they were already stepping inside, carrying a 7-pack and a bottle of something strong. It was so easy to let the moment carry itself, too easy. They made themselves at home. Alexander placed the whiskey on the counter. Lucas turned on the music. Theo started setting up the cards, laughing about how he was going to clean the house out again. I stood there, arms crossed, trying to decide if I should stop them. Say it wasn't a good idea, say Dad wouldn't want this. But instead I found myself walking to the fridge, pulling out glasses. I should have said no, but I was so used to hearing my own silence echo through the house that their laughter felt like a lifeline. They filled the room with something I hadn't felt in months: energy, warmth, noise. Theo handed me a drink without asking. I took it. Alexander offered me a chair beside him. I sat. Lucas raised his glass, saying to filling the emptiness. I smiled. I don't know what I thought would happen. Maybe nothing. Maybe a few laughs. And then they'd leave. But the music grew louder, the lights stayed dim, and their attention, it changed. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, like fog rolling in. You don't notice it until you're already surrounded. Theo made a joke, something about how I'd grown up nicely. I laughed it off, but I felt the way his eyes lingered. Alexander brushed my hand when I reached for the bottle, said sorry, with a look that didn't match his words. Darren kept leaning in too close when he spoke, his cologne thick in the air. I told myself they were just drunk, just being friendly, just playing around. But the words changed. Lucas asked truth or dare. Theo laughed, chimed in. Oh yeah, let's play like old times. I shook my head, said it was silly, but Alexander was already pulling the deck toward him, his voice low. Come on, we're just passing time. The game started. Harmless. Truth, what's your biggest fear? Dare do a shot without flinching, laughter teasing. but the questions started getting closer to the edge. Dare sit on someone's lap. Truth, who in this room would you kiss? They watched me closely, every answer, every movement, and I didn't stop it because part of me, the part that hadn't been touched, seen, or even acknowledged in so long, wanted to feel something, even if it was just 10 wrapped in danger. I should have left the room, should have said I was tired, should have locked my door and gone to bed. But I didn't, because for the first time in a very long time I didn't feel invisible, and I wasn't ready to give that feeling up. I started to notice the shift. It was in the way their eyes lingered, the way the laughter got quieter, heavier, like something unspoken had crept into the room and none of us wanted to say it aloud. I told myself I was imagining it, told myself they were just being playful, told myself I was overthinking, but I wasn't. Lucas leaned over, brushed a piece of lint from my shoulder. His fingers stayed there just a little too long. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was easier than asking him what he was doing. Theo, always the loud one, had gone unusually quiet. He watched me more than he joked. Every time I looked away, I could still feel his gaze. Alexander hadn't moved much, still calm, still observant, but I felt him watching, not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made me aware. Of my legs, the hem of my shorts, the way I tilted my head when I laughed, and maybe that was the moment I should have left. But I didn't, because somewhere in the middle of all of it I felt something I didn't want to admit. I felt seen, and not in the way Dad used to look at me when I got an A on a test, not in the way Mom used to kiss my forehead when I had a fever. No, this was different. This was the kind of attention I hadn't felt in years, the kind that makes your skin warm and your heart ache all at once. And I didn't know if I liked it or if I was just afraid of going back to the version of me that spent nights curled on the couch, waiting for texts that never came, eating dinner in silence, pretending that loneliness didn't crawl into bed with me. I kept thinking they're Dad's friends. They've known me since I was a teenager, they wouldn't cross a line. Would they? But something in me, something deeper, knew they already had. And the worst part, one hadn't stopped them. I'd laughed when Lucas called me beautiful, but my stomach tightened because I wasn't used to hearing that word anymore. Not like that. Theo had dared me to let him read the last text on my phone. When I handed it over, his fingers brushed mine. I felt it lingering, deliberate. Alexander said almost nothing. But when he finally did, he leaned in close and said, "You've changed. You're not the little girl I remember." I smiled, but my hands trembled because that sentence, it made it real. No more pretending, no more brushing it off as innocent fun. Something had shifted, and once it does, you can't unfeel it. I started replaying moments. I'd buried the times I stood in front of the mirror hoping someone would notice the new lipstick, the new dress, the nights I watched romantic dramas just to feel something secondhand. I remembered birthdays where the only voice I heard was a voicemail, holidays where the dinner table had too many chairs, years of craving affection, of shrinking so small I forgot how to take up space. And now in this moment, 3 sets of eyes were giving me that space. Too much of it, too heavy, too loaded. My mind screamed no, but my body, my heart, it hesitated, it leaned in. It lingered too long. When Lucas touched my arm, it fluttered. When Alexander said my name, it didn't recoil. When Theo brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, and then Alexander looked at me, his voice low, calm, he said, "If you could be with any one of us, who would you choose?" The room went still. Even the music felt quieter. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't answer. And maybe I didn't have to, because in that moment everything that had been dancing at the edges of the night came rushing in. Alexander didn't look away when he said it. "You're not a little girl anymore, you know," he said, it like it was a fact, like I was the last one to realize it. And maybe I was. I laughed nervously, softly, like I didn't hear it the way he meant it. But I did. Every syllable landed somewhere deep in me, in a place I hadn't let anyone touch in a very long time. Theo smirked, leaned forward with that playful grin he always wore, and said, "I dare you to sit on Lucas's lap just for a minute. He looks cold." The room erupted in chuckles. Even Lucas threw his hands up like, "Don't blame me. It's just a game." I shook my head, said it was ridiculous, said I wasn't playing anymore. Hand to hand, his fingers grazing mine just a moment longer than they needed to. Theo sat behind me close enough for our shoulders to touch, whispering stories into my ear that made me laugh and blush. Lucas traced little circles along my lower back with his thumb while pretending not to notice what he was doing, and I started to respond, a smile here, a glance there, a lie Len that went a little too far before pulling back. It was like standing at the edge of something dangerous but exhilarating. I kept telling myself I was in control, that I could stop this whenever I wanted, that it was just harmless flirting, just attention. But why did it feel like I wasn't the one holding the wheel? I felt a live, desired scene. But I also felt wrong. Like every second that passed, I was stepping further into something I wouldn't know how to walk back from. Theo dared me to show them a secret tattoo. I didn't have Lucas bet he could guess the color of my bra. Alexander, always the quiet one, just watched, but his silence, it said more than any of their jokes. I stood up suddenly, said I needed to check the food, said I needed a minute, anything to break this fell that was tightening around me. I walked into the kitchen, closed the fridge even though I hadn't opened it, gripped the counter with both hands and stared at nothing. What was I doing? These were Dad's friends, men who had watched me grow up, men who should have protected me, not circled me like wolf-wolves, sensing weakness. But I hadn't stopped them, not really, because part of me didn't want to, and that was the part one couldn't look at too closely. I took a deep breath, tried to reset my face, wiped my palms on my jeans, and stepped back into the living room. When I came back from the kitchen, they were waiting, all three of them silent, watching. They didn't say anything. When I walked back in, they didn't have to. The room was thick with something I couldn't name, but I could feel it crawling up my spine, settling in my throat. They were all seated, still silent, watching me like I was something new, something they hadn't noticed before, or maybe something they had but had finally decided to acknowledge. I stood at the edge of the room, frozen. Part of me wanted to run, but I didn't move. Alexander was the first to stand. Slow, calm, he walked over to me like there was nothing unusual about any of this, like this was just another game night, just another moment. And then he reached up and gently touched my face, just the side of it, his palm against my cheek, warm, steady, certain I didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't pull away. I just stood there, breathing too fast, heart pounding in my ears. But still Theo came next. He stepped behind me so close I could feel the shape of him against my back. He leaned down, his voice low, barely a whisper. "You don't have to say anything, just stay." My breath caught, and I hated how much I didn't want to pull away. Lucas stayed in his seat, but his eyes, they were darker, now not playful, not teasing, just waiting. I should have said something. Anything. I should have stepped back, turned around, walked out, but I didn't. I stayed frozen in that awful electric quiet, a moment stretched so thin it felt like it would snap. Alexander's hand dropped from my face, but not in rejection, in permission. And to let it happen. The line wasn't crossed with force. There were no demands, no raised voices, no pressure. Just a shift, a breath, a glance. A yes that I never spoke out loud but gave in a 100 unspoken ways we didn't talk. There were no declarations, no explanations, just movement, hands, heat. A mess of choices made in silence. It wasn't loud, it wasn't fast, but it was real and wrong. God, it was wrong, but I didn't stop it. I couldn't even tell you why, because part of me felt like I'd already gone too far before it even started, and part of me wanted to disappear into it. When it was over, no one said a word. Alexander sat back down, Theo walked away, Lucas lit a cigarette without asking, and two just sat there still, numb, not crying, not shaking, not anything, just empty, like something had been taken from me. But I wasn't sure what it was. Or if I'd given it away myself. They didn't stay long after no one said it was time to go. No one asked for the time, but something shifted and the energy collapsed in on itself. Alexander was the first to stand. He didn't look at me. Just grabbed his coat, nodded once, and walked out the front door like he couldn't get out fast enough. Lucas followed, slower, his eyes swept past me but never landed. Not once, not even to say goodbye, just silence and then the click of the door behind him. Theo lingered. Of course he did. He tried to make a joke, something dumb about wild nights and not telling Dad. But the words hung in the air, heavy, unwanted. He saw it too. The way it didn't land, the way I didn't smile. He gave this little half shrug, then left without another word, and then I was alone again. The room still smelled like them. Cologne whiskey, the faintest trace of smoke. I stood in the center of it all, not knowing what to do with myself, not knowing where to sit or what to touch or how to feel. I went upstairs, stripped off my clothes, and stepped into the shower hot water, scalding the kind that stings your skin but makes you feel something. I stayed there for over an hour, watching the steam rise, letting it blur the mirrors, hoping it would erase something. I scrubbed my arms raw, washed my hair 3 times, scrubbed between my fingers, under my nails, down my back, over my C********T, but there was no rinsing it away. Whatever it wasn't on the surface. It was inside, tucked into the folds of me, clinging to every thought, every breath. I didn't sleep. That night I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in reverse, trying to find the moment I could have said no. The second I could have pulled away, but there wasn't one clear answer, just a slow unraveling of 100 tiny choices that led to one final silence. 3 days later, Dad came home. He walked through the front door like nothing had changed, dropped his suitcase by the stairs, called out my name like he used to. Asked if I'd eaten, said he missed my face, and I just stood there, nodding, smiling too tightly, saying welcome back with a voice that didn't sound like mine. He never asked about them, never mentioned the guys, and they never came back. No more game nights, no more knocks on the door, no more laughter from the living room. They were gone just like that, and maybe that should have brought me relief. But all it brought was emptiness, because now every time I walked past the living room, I felt it all over again. The heaviness, the silence, the truth that no one would ever talk about. I felt like a stranger in my own skin, like something inside me had shifted and I couldn't shift it back. Every CRE in the floorboards made me jump. Every glance from my father felt like a spotlight, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't look him in the eyes. I still don't know what to call it. What really happened that night? Was it betrayal? Was it manipulation? Or was it something far more complicated? Something no word quite fits? I've turned it over in my mind more times than I can count. Try to lay it out like pieces of a puzzle. But no matter how I arrange them, they never quite fit. Sometimes I ask myself, was I complicit? Did I cross the line just as much as they did? Was I looking for something I shouldn't have been? Or was I just broken, lonely, tired of being invisible? Was I a woman who let her emptiness drive her into the arms of the only people who noticed she was still breathing? Or was I a girl who didn't know how to say no because she didn't really believe she had the right? There are moments, quiet, still moments when the shame rolls in like a tide and I can't breathe under it. I think about Dad, about his smile when he walked through the door, about how relieved he looked to see I was Oka, how he never knew that while he was away, the very people he trusted had become something else entirely. Sometimes I wonder, would he hate me if he knew, or would he just be disappointed not in them in me? And that thought, it cuts deeper than all the others, because I used to believe I was a good person. Flawed, sure, wounded, yes, but good. That night cracked something in me. It wasn't just about what we did. It was what it revealed, that part of me could be so hungry for connection that I would take it from the wrong hands, accept it in the wrong form, even when every part of me whispered that it wasn't right. I think about writing a letter, sometimes to Dad, to explain, to apologize, to confess. But I never do, because no matter how I try to frame it, there's no way to make it sound like anything but betrayal. And the truth is, the real betrayal wasn't just of my father. It was of the version of me. I thought I was the version who had limits, the version who had lines, the version who would never let a moment like that happen, but she's gone, now replaced by someone I don't always recognize. And every time I look in the mirror, I see pieces of her floating beneath the surface, trying to come back, trying to believe she's still worth something. But some reflections, once shattered, can't be put back the same way again. Have you ever been so lost that when someone gave you attention, you forgot to ask if it was right? Have you ever been so desperate to feel something, anything, that you didn't stop to wonder if it came at too high a cost? Because that night I didn't ask if it was Oka. I didn't ask if it was safe. I didn't even ask if it was real. I just let it happen. I let them in, not just into the house but into the most fragile parts of me. And now I'm left asking questions that never get answers. Was I wrong for letting them in that night? Or was I just broken in ways I didn't understand yet? Was I searching for comfort in the only form it showed up? Or was I complicit in a silence that I should have shattered? I don't know. I really don't know, but maybe you do. Tell me in the comments. Was this betrayal, or was it just a cry for connection gone too far? Have you ever made a choice you couldn't explain, not even to yourself? And if you believe stories like this need to be told not because they're comfortable but because they're real, then like this video and subscribe to Forbidden Desires, because here we don't just tell stories, we unravel the human.my. Story ends here. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks for listening and see you in the next videos.